clinical medicine, and he'll be talking about the rights and wrongs of prenatal screening. So can I have a very warm welcome to the stage for Professor Tom Shakespeare.
Thank you very much indeed. So I thought I'd write down my talk, and I've got 8 words here, that'll do. I'm going to leave 15 minutes for questions at the end, so I'm very keen to hear what you think. I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about disability and tell you what I think disability is, because it is relevant to the whole talk, because the whole point of prenatal diagnosis is to detect and prevent disability. So it's important that you know what it is. And you might say, oh, well, you know what it is, but you probably don't. And what I can also say is that a lot of geneticists don't know what it is either. So here's a fact. Something like 1 or 2% of all births are affected by congenital anomaly. And that was the fact that had a lot of doctors scratching their heads going, sure, that's not true. Surely we're going to eliminate disability by all this prenatal diagnosis. I've said you're not, because most disability is what you gain through life. So that is great. We're a recruitment organization. Any one of you can become disabled at any time, particularly on the streets of Manchester. So how do people become disabled? They live long enough, basically. And that's why only something like 1% of births are affected by disability, whereas something like 15 to 20% of the population are affected by disability. That is to say, you accumulate disability through your life, through injury, through disease, through working conditions, through not having work, poverty, all of these, and through living long enough. If you're lucky, you're going to live to 80 or 90, and good for you. The bad news is that you'll become disabled, almost inevitably. And as you look at members of your family, you'll know this to be a fact. Things like Alzheimer's, dementia, things like what's called macular degeneration is inevitable when people go past the age of about 80. So you will, what's happened is there's been a reduction in mortality, which means that you live longer, but there's been not a reduction in morbidity, which is that basically your final years may be somewhat limited in terms of what you can do. So, believe me, disability increases through age. The major cause of disability is not people born with genetic conditions. That's a fact, that's true. Okay? So that's disability out there. Now, I say a little bit more about disability. So you'll have noticed that I wheeled up a ramp. Yeah, it's an accessible place. I had a little bit of trouble in the bath because the soap is out of reach. I've only got little arms. And so you can see that the way that you arrange the hotel room, the stage, even the transport, I got a train here from London, and I could wheel onto the train. And at that point, I was equally fucked as everybody else who tried to get a train from London yesterday. That is to say, the West Coast Main Line is being whatever it is. We were all fucked. We were all disabled, in a sense. I was no more disabled than anybody else, because I could get on the train, I could get my space, and then I could sit back and let them shunt me via God knows where to get here. In other words, obviously I can't walk or barely walk at all. Obviously I'm short. Obviously I use a wheelchair. You can see all that. But things like the provision of ramps, things like the accessible transport enable me to be a fully functioning person. I work at the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, have to say it very fast. And I can use my desk, my computer, when the computer works. It's fucked at the moment. It has nothing to do with being disabled. There's a lift, boom. I don't know if you've ever been to London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. It is really difficult to find your way about. But I am no more disabled than anybody else who's desperately trying to find their way around these buildings in central London. The point is that it's an accessible workplace. If I wanted to be a welder, that would be a problem. In fact, I was going to say an astronaut. They do want little astronauts. Have you seen this? The European Space Agency wants smaller people, so they use less resources, and I thought, I'm in. I'm really, zero gravity, weightlessness. This perfect for somebody who can't walk. Send me now. So the environment is powerfully supportive or not supportive. And in the London School I do in tropical medicine, I research global disability. I've just been to Malawi and Zimbabwe, and I work in South Africa and Bangladesh and all these places where there is terrible poverty and where, therefore, there is more disability. And there are not services, they're not trains, they're not. The main way of getting about in somewhere like Uganda is, well, there's two ways, well, three if you include walking. One is a matatu, which is a minibus, and you bustle in there, and most of you would be fine. I would be screwed, because I can't get in a minibus very easily. And also, I would have to, where would my wheelchair go? Well, it'd probably be strapped on the top, and I'd have to pay extra. But it's my wheelchair, it's not extra, it's me. No, you have to pay extra. So the other option in Uganda is they're called boda bikes. You get on the back of a bike, and you zoom through the traffic, because the traffic is really rubbish in Kampala, places like that. Not something possible for me. I can't get on the back of a motorcycle and be whisked through. So the point I'm making is that your environment powerfully disables you, okay? You didn't come here for that talk, but I need to get that out of the way. So I'm looking at word number 2. You've heard Adam Rutherford this week talking about eugenics. Did people come to his talk? He's brilliant, and his book is really good. Excellent. So you know about eugenics. You know about the terrible things that were done, not just in Nazi Germany, but also in Nordic countries, in Alberta, in America, and all over the world, yeah? You know about that, okay? And I think it's important that you know about that, because the whole drift of prenatal genetic testing is to say, we're not like that, right? We're not like that. We're not doing what they did. And in that case, you have to think to yourself, well, what was the obnoxious? What was the bad aspects of what was being done there? And I'm going to summarize. I don't know whether Adam would agree with me, but I'm going to tell you what I think was the obnoxious way of thinking. And it was twofold. One is that there was a population policy. We are not going to have this sort of people, yeah? Whether they're feeble-minded or immigrants or women who are having sex when they shouldn't be, we're going to stop them reproducing, right? So that was an obnoxious aspect. There was a population policy. There was that's why Alberta had eugenics and Saskatchewan didn't, because Alberta decided, we're going to pass this law, we're going to sterilize all these people. So it was a population policy, we're not going to have those sorts of people, and it was coercive. Yeah? Now, eugenics involve things like bouncing baby competitions. We've just been talking about baby, and I love babies, and the prettier the better, and the bouncier the better, and, well, I haven't actually bounced a baby. Please, don't worry, I'm not going to bounce a baby. But you know what I mean. There's nothing wrong. It's not harmful to say you've got a great baby and have more babies than the rest of it. What's wrong is where you take away people's autonomy. Where you say, you are sterilized, you are sterilized, you are sterilized. Yeah? That is wrong. Because you don't opt for that. And I actually have been sterilized because I've had enough children, I had my tubes tied, and that's great. But that point was that is a normal method of contraception for many heterosexually active people in Britain and lots of countries. Nothing wrong with that. What is wrong is if you don't get a choice, if it's not down to you, if you are unable to reproduce, or certain sorts of people are not coming into the world because of your policy, okay? So that's what's wrong, in my view, of eugenics. It's a population policy, and it is coercive, yeah? That is what's wrong with it. Now, that was all. How long have I got? I can't even see my clock. Please tell me when I've finished and I've got 10 minutes to go, because we want to have questions, or discussion, or disagreement. Put all that aside. So what is genetic screening? What are you offered? Well, there's non-invasive and invasive. So non-invasive is a blood test, and invasive is something like chorion villus sampling of a woman's pregnancy or amniocentesis of a pregnancy, yeah? So historically, there was amniocentesis. Perhaps to a certain age. Down syndrome is not particularly bad, it's just a difference, but it's very easily detectable, and it increases with age. Yeah? So women's eggs are more likely to have trisomy, and therefore more likely not just to have Down syndrome, but other trisomies. Down syndrome is caused by trisomy 21. And therefore, an invasive test is you put a needle in and you find some amniotic fluid and you look at those cells to see if they have trisomy. Or a chorionic villus sampling, which is an earlier stage. It's a similar sort of thing, but it's a sampling of the villus of the placenta. And that gives a high level of accuracy. The problem with both of those tests, which are widely available, the other thing I should have said, I'm not against a woman's right to choose. I firmly, firmly believe in autonomy and women having choices over their pregnancy. So I'm not really here to tell you that that is wrong. The problem with both the amniocentesis and the chorionic villus sampling is that they have a miscarriage rate. Now, what that miscarriage rate is a controversy. But for the sake of argument, let's say it's about 1%. It depends who does it and how they do it and where they do it. So about 1% of wanted pregnancies, because these are mostly wanted pregnancies, because remember, they're about 18 weeks, they're certainly well into the pregnancy, yeah? So there's a sample for trisomy, and in a small number of cases, it leads to a miscarriage. And that is a late miscarriage. It's very sad. It's not wanted. It's not a woman who doesn't want to be pregnant. It's a woman who wants to be pregnant. And so it might cause a miscarriage. So that is to be avoided if possible. I mean, we could sample all pregnant women, and there would be 1% loss, and that would be very bad. So how can we reduce the number of people who have these invasive tests? Well, we could do it for age. Historically, it's done for age, women over the age of 35 or whatever it might be. But there are a range of non-invasive tests. And when I say non-invasive, they're just a blood test. So it used to be serum tests. Some version of heightened blood serum would be a telltale sign that you were in that category of women who should have or could have, if they wanted, a invasive amniocentesis. That historically was done with age and with heightened levels of blood serum hormone. Now, there is a new way of understanding women at greater, now the words are all loaded. A greater risk, we could say greater chance. Do you see the difference between chance and risk? So historically it's called risk, but I will call it chance. A greater chance of having a pregnancy affected by Down syndrome. So a serum test, but what's new and what's in some ways exciting, if you like, is what's called cell-free DNA. And this was the discovery that in the woman's blood, there were some cells that were from, or some cell-free DNA, some DNA that was from the fetus that was developing in her womb. And if you can identify those cell-free DNA and test them, you're going to get a much more accurate understanding of whether the pregnancy is affected by Down syndrome or other trisomy. And that is what's been rolled out now. That is what all pregnant women are increasingly being offered now. Another form of non-invasive test, but much more accurate than the serum test, okay? So that is genetic screening. That is what people are offered. There are some more sort of what you might call high-tech or more complicated versions of that. But they're particularly for families affected by genetic conditions in their family. So, I'm affected by a genetic condition in my family, so I might be offered that. Or if you've got a family history of something like cystic fibrosis or muscular dystrophy or hemophilia, those are all, mostly recessive conditions. So if mum and dad have got the condition, then, are carriers, I beg your pardon, carriers of the condition, then they've got a 1 in 4 chance of having affected a baby. And so for those families who've got a genetic history of a particular condition, then a geneticist, you'd be seeing a geneticist and you'd be offered something called pre-implantation genetic diagnosis, okay? And that is where you get pregnant, women gets pregnant through IVF, and before they're implanted, that's why it's called pre-implantation, the embryo's one cell is taken away, and this is then tells you whether that embryo is affected by It might be trisomy, it might be muscular dystrophy, it might be achondroplasia, my condition, it might be a lot of different things. And if it's affected, then that's not implanted. If it's not affected, that is implanted. Yeah? The thing about that is that up until recently, it's only been able to be done for one thing. So if you're looking for Down syndrome, you can look for that, and you can take a cell out, and you can test for that, yeah? And so you can avoid that, or you can avoid achondroplasia, or you can avoid muscular dystrophy, or cystic fibrosis, or anything else like that. So that is, but the difference with that, with those families, is that they have a closer relationship. They've seen it, that's one thing, and they have a close relationship probably with doctors, with geneticists who are responsible for understanding and responding to that. So I've said a little bit about disability, I've said a little bit about eugenics, and I've said a little bit about genetic screening. Now's the sort of bioethical bit. It's all bouncing around on the screen. Have I really only got 3 seconds left? That must be wrong. I hope it's wrong. So let's think about near patient. Let's think about the choices. Remember, right at the start, I said that eugenics was wrong, and this was not eugenic because it was not a population policy and it was not coercive. Well, I didn't say that. I'm going to say that the way that proponents of prenatal diagnosis talk is that they say that this is not eugenic, and it's not, because it's not coercive and it's not a population policy, yeah? Right, so let's look at that. Let's look at that choice a little bit more closely. And one aspect of the choice is information. Who here has got a new, let's say, car in the last 5 years? Yeah, a few of you. Who here has got a new hi-fi or music playing device in the last 5 years? Yeah, new telephone in the last 5 years. Yeah, all of you, great. All right, we'll stick with telephones then. When you got your new telephone, did you say, oh, fuck it, I don't know, give me whatever? I don't think you did. I think that you Googled it, and you went, oh, battery life, camera, what else I can do on it? Oh, yeah, I'll have that one. Yeah, so you got information about it, in other words. And certainly it was the case for your car, I'm sure it was. That's a lot of money, and you're going, oh, yeah. You're not going, I don't care as long as it's purple. You're going things like fuel economy, you're going, is it a hybrid, is it, da-da-da-da-da. Frankly, the color, to most people, is not the prime reason. Apart from me, I always want a purple car. So you're finding information out. So what information are pregnant women and their partners getting about disability? Yeah? Well, I haven't introduced myself. I was introduced. I have a G2A transposition at 0.380 in my FGFR3 gene. That's enough, isn't it? You're going to go home. You say, well, yeah, we had this really teacher's talk from this guy at a G2A transposition 0.380. Yeah, that. You're not going to say that. You might say, he's a little guy, he had no hair, he was in a wheelchair, he was pretty middle class, he'd been to Cambridge and he was a professor. If you got to know me over drinks, you might say, and he used to be a Newcastle United supporter, till they were taken over by bone sawers. And he lives in Kennington, and he's part of the South London Cripocracy. You didn't know there was one, but there is. We have a WhatsApp group, so we must be real. The point is that me telling you I've got G2A transposition and 0.3 by FGFR3 gene is great for Adam Rutherford, but shit for the rest of you. It really doesn't tell you what you are. And I'm not I can see you all. So I can say that a lot of people in this room have got XX syndrome. And some people in this room have got XY syndrome, and some people I'm not asking questions. But that's not why I'm a sociologist, it'd be stupid for me to say, and the reason that you're paid less, ladies, is because you've got an XX syndrome. And it's all genetic, I'm very sorry. No. It's obviously social. It's to do with a lot of things, and we can have another talk about that. But that's why women are paid less on average than men. It's nothing to do with their genes. And remember what I said about disability. I said about my room, I said about the transport, the whole point about disability, it's heavily about the way society treats it. I'm a white, male, middle-class guy. Of course I'm a professor, or could be. Because those are the sorts of people that are professors in our society. And the fact that I'm disabled doesn't matter diddly squat. Because I went to Cambridge, I've got the right accent, and I'm bright, and all the rest of it, and therefore I can flourish in my chosen milieu. It's not because I've got a G to A transposition point there gene. That is true. Well, it's sort of true. Drinks. But what are women told, or women and their partners told about their pregnancy? They're not told all of that. They're not told. They're told that they have a trisomy 21 case. They might be told a little bit more about Down syndrome, but they're not told about the lives of people with Down syndrome. They're not told about the families, the education, or rest of it, of people with Down syndrome. Because that, I would say, is the relevant information. That is what you need to know. It's like saying to somebody, oh, you're going to have an XX, I'm afraid. But, as soon as you know that you're going to have a girl, you think, all right, she can do this, she can do that, she can do the other. I'm going to back her all the way. She doesn't have to be gender stereotypical. Whatever. It's all fine. I love her, whatever. Yeah? But do you see what I've said there? You said we will encourage her. We will support her. We will try and remove barriers. We will enable her to do what she wants to do, and we will live in a better society as a result. All of those things are equally relevant to trisomy. Yeah? Because somebody with Down syndrome, the life expectancy of people with Down syndrome is vastly increased. Because, of course, they are dancers, drag artists, cleaners and receptionists and actors and all the rest of it. Because there's so many things that they can do. And that is not always communicated to the pregnant women and their partners. And that is the most relevant information. So, information. Oh, yeah. Now, if I was to say to you, you can have a test, but only if you have a termination, you go, that's coercion, that is. That is standard coercion, because you're not giving her a real choice. What I'm going to suggest to you is in the clinical encounter, it's not always a real choice. It's a really difficult situation. I'm not trivializing it. I may be trying to make you laugh, but it is really, really difficult. And the clinical encounter, the white coats, the whole, you offer a test for things that you think are bad, or you talk about risk, the risk. And at every, I don't know how many appointments people who've had babies have had, but they've probably had a few with various midwives and all the rest of it. Imagine at every single one, the doctor or the nurse or the midwife looked at your notes and said, oh, you didn't have a test. Are you sure? Because that is what happens every single time. You will be asked, why didn't you have that test? So, I need to turn my battery off. Everybody has that, because otherwise I would have left in your lap, lady. And I'm 50 kilos. The point is that you should be asked once, do you want to have this test? And then they should never ask you again. But you are continually asked at every consultation, do you want to have that test? And there's lots of evidence that it's not coercion, but we've talked about bias. We talked about implicit pressure. There's lots of evidence from the people who know best, pregnant women, that this encounter is not always free. It's not always they are making up their minds themselves. They're left to do what they want. I think it is a really big decision, but here's the spoiler. I think it's a decision for the pregnant woman and her partner. End of. And what they need is really good information, and they need to be supported to make the decision that is best for them and their family. And it's not trivial. It's a really important decision. But it's the people who know are the people who should decide. There's this anthropologist, American anthropologist called Rainer Rapp, And she says about amniocentesis, she says, this makes every woman into a bioethicist. And I would say more than that. I'd say women and their partners, and they're bioethicists because they're trying to work out what makes life valuable. What makes life worth living? Are you still valuable if you don't have as many GCSEs as the next person? Are you still valuable if you don't have a first-class degree from the University of Cambridge? I would say yes. It does, that is not the answer to happiness. I should know. I've got a first-class degree from the University of Cambridge. It doesn't make you better. And the fact that this person is unlikely to get many GCSEs, is unlikely to get a first-class degree from the University of Cambridge, well, certainly not, does not make them inferior. Everybody is morally equal. Everybody is worthy. And everybody can have a good life. I mean, I do have a good life, and I hope you have a good life, but there's some people who've got first-class degrees from the University of Cambridge who have a shit life. And I know, I've met them. So what I'm trying to get across to you is that your value, your quality of life, does not depend on your qualifications, your independence, your driving ability, how many pints you can drink, how much you earn, how long you live, or anything like that. That is not how you have a good life. Sorry, spoiler. So, information, coercion, but there's a third aspect that I want to, and I can walk this through with you. Non-invasive tests, okay? You're not going to risk losing the pregnancy if you have a non-invasive test. Do you want to have a non-invasive test? I don't know. There's no risk to it. All right, okay. And does most people have it? Yes, most people have it. Okay, I'll have the non-invasive test, the screening test. Okay, so it comes back and it says positive, but that actually means negative. Yeah, complicated language there. Oh, so does that mean I should have I could have a no, nobody have a termination on the basis of that test. So what do I do? Well, the only thing to do is to have a CVS or an amniocentesis to test whether it's really a false positive or a true positive. Oh, so that's the only thing I can do. Yeah, all right, well, I'll do that. Now, at this stage, the amniocentesis or the CVS or the other diagnostic procedure comes back and it says, yes, your pregnancy is affected by Down syndrome, achondroplasia, or whatever else it might be. Oh, well, what can I do now? Well, you could have a termination of pregnancy, but this is a wanted pregnancy. Yeah. What do most people do? Well, most people have a termination. And that is the case. In Britain, 90% of people, women who have been diagnosed with Down syndrome have a termination. And so people might, at this stage, do something which they did not think they were going to do at that part when they were right on that side of the stage. Do you see what I mean? It's step by step. And it's step by step with not much time. And biology has given us 9 months. And the law says that termination beyond 24 weeks is not allowed except in exceptional cases. And therefore, there is a clock ticking. It's more complicated. You can get a termination after 24 weeks if your pregnancy is affected by disability, but it's more complicated. So basically, the clock is ticking. And remember, you're having your amniocentesis 18 weeks, 15 weeks. So there's not much time. And it takes a couple of weeks to come back because you have to culture the cells. So there's not much time to decide, and the clock is ticking. And what I'm saying is that when you're making decisions up front, you're not deciding on what you're deciding on in the middle of the stage. Here, you're deciding your entire life. You're deciding about a termination of pregnancy, which you might not expect or want to have. There, you're deciding whether to have a blood test. You might not even know you're having a blood test. Do you know, pregnant women in this room, did you know that you were tested for syphilis during pregnancy? I don't think you did. Some of you might, because you read all the forms, but you probably were. So what I'm saying, I'm not, forgive me, I'm not implying any sense that a pregnant woman is not fully able to make up her own mind. I'm not. But I'm saying that there are so many tests and there are so many things that you could test for that I'm not 100% certain that at every stage you're fully knowing what is happening with your bloods. That's all. You do know, obviously, you've had an amniocentesis. So remember at the start, A, I said disability was social. B, I said that eugenics was wrong because it's coercive and it was a policy. It was a population policy. We don't want to have that sort of person. And you can see what I'm saying in terms of what I call near-patient issues. I'm not sure it's as free a choice as it's made out to be. And that's a problem. That's why I'm talking to you. You may not be pregnant now, and you may want or not want to get pregnant in the future. But I want you to do the thinking now, if you are going to get pregnant in the future, or your partner is, and think what you do. It's very unlikely that you'll have a pregnancy affected by disability. Remember, only 1% of births are affected by disability. But you might. And and I'm not here to tell you it's not right to do this or it's not right to do that. It's your choice. But I'm here to try and support you, whatever choice you make, yeah? And there's a group called Antenatal Results and Choices who do offer a lot of support to women and partners having tests, and they've referred people to me who've been tested for achondroplasia, my condition, and I've told them all about achondroplasia, and I've never once told them to continue or to end the pregnancy. Never once. That is not my job. I should be as non-directive as possible. I'm not a genetic cancer. I do know all about achondroplasia. So I will tell them, and then they go off and do what they do. And you know what? I don't even know what they do. But I want them to be informed, because if they continue the pregnancy, I want them to know what that involves. And if they terminate the pregnancy, I want them to know what that involves. That way they're informed. They have a free choice. They can do what it is they want. Okay, so far, I've talked about eugenics, I've talked about disability, I've talked about genetic screening, I've missed out a whole big thing, but I kind of talked about it. Because I talked about the near-patient issues, the information, the time, the coercion, the conveyor belt, if you like. I've talked about all those. What about the sort of wider issues in society? Are we a society which welcomes disabled people? Yeah, there's a hollow laugh from the front. No! We're a society which tells people your life is going to be shit if you're disabled. You're going to have to benefit, it's going to be bad. So the pregnant woman and her partner who are making up their minds as to what to do, they're going to say to themselves, what is life like for disabled people in us? Oh shit, it's really bad. Yeah? So those wider social issues. One of you is going to have to probably give up work because you're going to have to support this person. This person is going to have quite a lot of difficulty getting into the school of their choice because most schools do not want disabled kids. This person is going to have more difficulty finding a job because the employment rate for disabled people is nearly, not quite, but nearly twice that of non-disabled people, the unemployment rate. So they're more likely to be unemployed. And do you know what percentage of people with intellectual disability are employed in Britain? It's 7%. 6 or 7%, it varies a bit. So it's really low. So the odds are this person will be not welcome in their school and they won't get a job and one of you is going to have to get work and you're going to live in poverty. But apart from that, it's a free choice. It's up to you what you do. So if we're to have genetic screening, we need to welcome the diversity of people. We need to support the diversity of people. Otherwise, we're telling them what to do. And telling them what to do is exactly why you nodded when Adam Rutherford said eugenics was bad. Because it was telling them what to do. It was coercion. It was a population policy. Why do all pregnant women now have, whether it's serum tests or non-invasive prenatal testing? Why do they have that? Because it's a population effing policy. It was decided at the Department of Health that this was cost-effective. And where are these? Where did we last see these judgments of the cost-effectiveness? Yeah. Where were people sitting exam papers talking about the cost of the construction of an asylum versus the cost of the construction of housing estates? Where was that last recorded? Well, exactly when Adam was talking about eugenics, that was it. People encouraged to think disability is terrible. People encouraged to think in terms of mercy killing. People encouraged to think in terms of useless eaters. All of that is from that era where we don't want to be like them. So we're going to have to work really hard if we're going to have genetic screening at the same time. So when I was on the Nuffield Council on Bioethics, we did a study of non-invasive prenatal testing and screening, and we said society must welcome people with disabilities. And if it welcomes people, if people can lead a good life with disability, then it's a fair choice. Then it's a real choice. Then people are actually deciding. Otherwise, you might as well say, don't have any poor babies. Don't have any black babies. Because you live in a racist, deeply divided society. And your life will be limited. Because it will. That is a social fact, on average. So it's incumbent on us to welcome diversity. And I've got a few more minutes left. And what I've talked about so far is Down syndrome, okay? Trisomy, because it is more common. What's coming down the tracks? And what I want to say to you is that the Down syndrome cases are the canary in the coal mine, to use a cliche. Because I told you 1% of births affected congenital disability. That's true. But all of us have mutations in our genome. All of you carry 4 or 5 recessive conditions, which, if you had a different partner, might lead to a 1 in 4 chance of having an affected pregnancy, yeah? All of you have got about 100 mutations in your genome, yeah? What might, they're not very important. Dementia, I don't know, Parkinson's. They are late onset impacts, and every one of us carries them. And that's the wonderful thing about genetics, because I said I had a G2H transposition point 385. I know what my mutation is. You don't. What I do know is that you carry them. And therefore, in a way, we are all the same. Well, of course we're all the same, but we are all the same, not just because we're in Manchester this Sunday morning, but because we all carry genetic anomalies. And I do too, but I know what mine is, and you don't. Yeah? And so when we're talking about screening, right, think about, I told you that embryos were tested for one thing, and it was families that were very much affected by genetic conditions in their family. Not true anymore. You can have what's called pre-implantation genetic diagnosis to choose to have a girl, or rather more commonly, a boy rather than a girl. And if you I don't know, I should have done a vote at the start. How many of you support choice and complete choice? We are basically pro-choice, yeah? But are you okay with that choice? It's like me not supporting Newcastle United because they'd taken away bone sawers. If you live in a very sexist society in which women are valued less than men, are you happy with that choice? Are you happy with, there are genes that relate to intelligence. Are you happy to detect those and choose for those? Are you happy, there's a gentleman nodding at everything. Are you happy to have, what about risk-taking? A lot of people who end up in, let us say, nefarious ways of life are really, risk-takers, yeah? So let's eliminate some of that, shall we? Because it's associated with criminality, yeah? That's great. But what you've just eliminated are quite a lot of the entrepreneurs, quite a lot of the people who invent stuff. Because the same genes do different things for different people, yeah? I mean, it's the case, for example, that where do we find genes associated with dyslexia? We often find them in the criminal population. That is true. If you do testing in prison, you might find 6% of prisoners have genes for dyslexia. If you go to the art school and do the same test for dyslexia, you'll probably find about the same, maybe a higher proportion of artists have dyslexia. Leonardo, I think, had dyslexia. Loads of people. So the same gene has different impacts on different people depending on the social, cultural milieu. And you're all, after this, you're all going online, you're all, I don't know, voting or some shit like that, or ordering a new mobile phone. Who wrote the internet? You've had a talk about neurodiversity. Neurodiverse people wrote the internet. And you're spending every day on it. You need people like this. You need Bill Gates. I'm sorry, but you really need Bill Gates and people like him. So I'm making a point that all of those testing and dilemmas, all of those choices and difficulties are coming home to roost big time. And whether they're coming for you because you've not had your children yet, or they're coming for your children because smugly you're going, oh, I'm glad I didn't have those tests in my day. They will come, and you will have to decide. We will have to decide. Should we leave it to the pregnant couple? Or should we, as a society, say, you know what? It's okay to test for things like Down syndrome, achondroplasia, but we don't want you to. Or maybe we'll say, bring it on. Let's have the master race. Oh, sorry. I wouldn't have said it. Thank you very much.